This is your Thursday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Got plenty to get to today. Ethan Finlay from Minnesota United will be with me in just a little bit to talk about the season, to talk about being a new dad, to talk about the identity of the Loons, and talk a little fantasy football, too. Apparently the Loons have their own fantasy football league within the team. Talk a little draft strategy with him as well. I'm going to get into some Vikings stuff because Kirk Cousins talked yesterday for the first time since some major news earlier this week, and got a Little League World Series update because someone from our region is absolutely dominating the Little League World Series of baseball. But first, what did I miss? Slightly bigger people playing baseball. Minnesota Twins. Again, this point in the season, don't always focus on this team right now, but plenty of interesting things to note from their 9-6 10-inning win over Boston on Wednesday night. First off, as I tweeted on Wednesday night, I was kind of following the game, helping put the kids to bed, things like that. They're night owls. It's still summer. And so I see that Colome's in to pitch. He ends up blowing the save in the 9th inning, gets out of the jam at least, gets them to the 10th inning, and then Hansel Robles gives up 5 runs in the 10th inning. Now, normally that would be really bad news for the Twins, but remember, they traded Robles about a month ago at the deadline, so it's only fair now. I'm used to Colome and Robles both getting lit up in the same game, but now at least there's one on each team. There's not both of them on the Twins, so Robles doing it for Boston. They traded for him at the deadline. He gives up 5 runs, a couple long home runs to Jake Cave and Josh Donaldson. Twins hang on 9-6. And I got a text from Royce. It's like Patrick Royce. It's like 10 o'clock. A little bit after that, says, "Call me." I'm like, okay. He and I talk fairly regularly, including obviously for this Monday podcast that we do on this show. But I was like, okay. I was assuming it was work related, but anytime someone texts after 10 o'clock, you're like, oh, something up, something wrong. So I'm like, yeah, give me a minute. I'll give you a call. So I give him a call. And yeah, of course, it's about the Twins, and he's like, "Were you watching the game?" And I'm like, yeah, I was watching the game. He says, or I was paying attention to the game, and he's like, I'm not going to do the full-on Royce voice, but it's a great voice. He's basically says he's watching, and the Twins are rallying, and Justin Morneau, the Twins analyst, said the Twins rallied because they were trying to pick up their closer, Alexander Colome, trying to after he had the rough 9th inning, trying to pick him up. And I think most people probably would have just walked right past that line and said, oh yeah, that's what baseball players do. Royce was cackling about it. He was like, "They're trying to pick this guy up. Are you kidding me?" Like the guy that ruined their season. So that's the backstory to all this. But Royce called me. We had a good laugh about that, but maybe they were trying to pick him up. Who knows? Maybe Colome is still popular in the dugout, in the clubhouse. We'll see. But he did blow another save, got them to the 10th inning at least, where old friend Hansel Robles gave up the bomb. Now, interesting stat I saw tweeted from Aaron Gleeman. Couldn't believe this because I haven't been paying attention to this. This was like my pet project at the beginning of the year, so I can't believe I've fallen behind on this. But Gleeman tweeted that since starting the year 0-8 in extra inning games, and again, that was something I was tracking very close when things were going poorly at the start of the year. The Twins are 11-2 in extra inning games since then, and now have the second most extra inning wins in all of baseball. Amazing. Just wanted to share that with you as an update of sorts in case you weren't paying attention, because I haven't been paying attention certainly to that stat nearly as much as well. But the big thing I need to talk about off of this game is Miguel Sano. Crushed 495 feet, home run to pretty much dead center, a little bit off center, but 495 exit velocity of like 116.7, the longest home run in the majors this season. I think he's got like 3 of the 5 longest home runs this year. And when I saw it, when I tweeted about it, I was like, I see he's doing that thing where he gives us hope again, because this is what Miguel Sano does, right? He hits balls so far, and he has this talent. But what do you do with Miguel Sano? Where does he fit, if at all, into any kind of future plan? So it kind of got me thinking, like, what's the short term, medium term, long term with Miguel Sano? So here's his contract status. Basically, he's under contract for 1 more year next season. I think he makes about $9 million. He signed that extension that was essentially 3 years, $30 million, bought out some of his earning power. But his salaries actually fluctuate by the year. Next year, it's a little bit lower than it is this year, so a little over $9 million next season. That's, of course, guaranteed. Baseball contracts are guaranteed. 2023 is a team option for around $14 million, if I'm not mistaken, because it also includes a $2.5 million buyout or something in that range. So basically, you could go into this offseason and think about trying to trade him. You could look at his body of work this season and say, well, maybe he's turned a corner. You could fool yourself into thinking that. I mean, basically since mid-May, he's got like 20 homers and 280 at-bats. He's got, a 835 OPS. He's hitting 240, which isn't great, but that's doable. That's okay. Like the first month and a half of the year just completely tanked his average, tanked a lot of the other things he's got going on. Now, he's always going to strike out way too much. I saw our Phil Miller tweeted an amazing stat the other day that caught my eye, basically saying where Twins players fall on the team's all-time strikeout spectrum. Miguel Sano already number 4 on that list, despite having way fewer at-bats, and he just passed Kirby Puckett on the all-time strikeout list for the Twins. Now, Miguel at that point had 966. I think he had one more in Wednesday's game, so 967, I would say. But he has 2,318 career at-bats. He's already passed Kirby Puckett, who has 7,244 career at-bats. He passed Puckett in strikeouts in like 5,000 fewer at-bats. So that tells you a little bit of the feast or famine nature of Miguel Sano. Not that you needed further reinforcement of that, but what do you do? What do you do with Miguel Sano? You got so many guys that you have questions about going into 2022, these guys that were prospects 3, 4, 5 years ago. What do you do with Byron Buxton? Do you try to trade him in the offseason? Do you try to work out something long-term? Is he going to rejoin the team soon because he's been playing in St. Paul? That'd be nice. So a lot of questions about those two, especially core guys that we've been hearing about 6, 7, 8 years and that have produced to a certain degree for the Twins, but are not, for whether it's health with Buxton or production with Sano, the inconsistency have not cemented themselves even as future, pillars of this organization. So, well, I'll be really interested to see what happens with Sano in the offseason. He's a corner infielder. They've got a lot of those. I don't know if first base is his best position. I don't know if that's his best value, but he's been hitting better lately. The more you think about him hitting better lately, though, the more you realize, is that just fool's gold, and is that really going to hold up? One more quick Twins note, too. Joe Ryan, the pitching prospect that I really liked that they got in the Nelson Cruz trade, had a really nice outing again on Wednesday. I think he went 5 innings, gave up 1 run, 8 strikeouts. So I would like to see Joe Ryan here sooner rather than later as well. Speaking of guys like Jose Miranda that I would really like to see with the big league team. And I'll get to Ethan Finlay in a minute, but I also want to touch on Kirk Cousins because he addressed the media on Wednesday for the first time since earlier this week when the Vikings brought in Michael Osterholm to talk to the team about vaccines. Cousins, notably a vaccine skeptic. He didn't have a whole lot to say about that per Mark Craig's story, basically saying it was good information, kind of brushed that off. The more interesting thing to me was that he got on the record about Everson Griffen's return, and again, didn't have much to say about it, but was asked about the tweets of Everson Griffen about 8 months ago, and saying, being unflattering about Kirk Cousins and saying that Mike Zimmer never wanted him. So here's the audio of Kirk Cousins' rather short answer about that.
Yeah, we actually talked in January, so yeah, it's kind of old news. Yeah, but it's great to have him back. Great to see his smile around the building. Yeah. I talked to him a couple days ago, yeah.
Cousins was smiling through that short answer, so hard to really know where his head is at on that. I don't think he loves it though. That was the last question he took. Sometimes when athletes don't want to talk anymore, that's what they do. They cut things off. I'll just be curious to see how this plays out, whether this is something that becomes a thing. I've mentioned this. It's been a rough camp for Kirk Cousins. It's been a rough preseason. Sounds like the starters are going to get some more run in this third game because they didn't do so great in the second game. Still time to turn this around before the season starts, but the more you say that, the time keeps getting shorter and shorter, and this Everson Griffen thing still remains fascinating to me.
I'm Chris Hine, Timberwolves beat writer at the Star Tribune and the first 5-time guest in daily delivery history. Thank you for listening to this podcast. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast, our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, and even all of Rand's future blog posts about how the Timberwolves should trade for players they will never get, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Happy to be joined today on Daily Delivery by Ethan Finlay, Minnesota United. It's been an interesting year for Minnesota United, I'd say. I feel like the last time we might have talked, it was right at the start of the year, and things didn't necessarily go great at the start of the year, and now things are going considerably better. Got yourself back into that kind of playoff mix where you want to be. First off, Ethan, welcome. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. You said it right on the head. At the start of the season when we maybe last spoke, we were down in the dumps, and 0-4 start is never good in any sport. But yeah, we got the train in the right direction now.
What was it that got things moving? And when you start 0-4, I feel like there's certainly an element of, you're not going to panic because it's, the season's only, 10% over or whatever it is. And you still believe in what you had at the start of the year. But at the same time, you kind of, when you start 0-4, there's got to be some elements of like, oh, got to start winning pretty soon. And are we on the right track kind of thing?
Yeah, I think I took a lot of solace in, the 0-4 start. It could have easily been a 2-2. We could have gotten points out of some of those games and just didn't. We're unfortunate. Ball luck is a real thing, and I don't think we had much of it at the start of the year. And I knew we were creating chances. And I knew some of the chances that we were giving up were very much preventable. They were mostly errors on our side of the ball. It wasn't like we were being dominated in the play. So for me, I thought it was always things that we could address and improve on. And I think that's what we did. And, I've been in this league 10 years now, and it's the dog days of summer that separate teams. And that's what I think we've done. Saying that, I think, we're sitting fifth in the table. We think we could be sitting much closer to, 3, 2, 1. Some of those top teams right now. We've dropped a couple points, I think, with some ties most recently, which we're disappointed in. But that's just a shift in the mentality from where we were, 3-4 months ago when we were just trying to get a win on the board. Now we're starting to look at, how do we seed ourselves? How do we get a home playoff game? Yeah.
How frustrating is that idea of ball luck in soccer? I mean, every sport, there's an element of luck, but when there's a sport like soccer and people who aren't soccer fans are like, oh, every game's 0-0, and that's not it. I mean, that's just dumb, but like, there's not going to be a lot of goals scored in a game. You might get 2 to 4 goals in a given game. And like, that's it. Like luck can play a huge part in a game both ways. And it probably evens out over the course of a season, you would hope. But when you go through a stretch like that, where you're not getting it, how frustrating is that?
It's extremely frustrating. It's frustrating for individuals when, they're going through possibly a scoring rut, or they're not playing their best. And, a touch or two just goes the wrong way and sends a player in on a breakaway after a guy's had a fantastic game. That can happen to a center back or to a goalkeeper. And the same thing on the offensive side of the ball where, ball's coming across. It looks like it's going to be an easy finish and it skips one way, or you don't get your feet right in that moment and you don't take advantage of that chance. And the game, like you said, ends 0-0. And that little small play can make a huge difference. And on the other side, the luck aspect of it, you want to create, some of that and put players in tough positions. But, I just comes to mind, San Jose, last 2 games they played, they had 2 own goals, one against us in a game that we ended up drawing. And then, 3 days later when they played the LA Galaxy to get a 2-1 win on the road. And, you have to create those moments, of course, but that little ball luck, and that can change your season, get 3 points on the road in a place like LA Galaxy. So, those are just small examples that I look around the league and I see every so often. So, we got to create that luck. I think we're going to continue to press and we'll be all right.
You referenced that maybe United is played better than their record indicates, and maybe some of the advanced passing numbers bear that out, some of the possession metrics. Is that how it feels right now, that you, like you said, you could be sitting a little bit higher right now, even though you are fifth?
Yeah, I do. Scoring has not been this club's issue really since its inception in MLS. So for us to be in the drought that we are, and I don't know the numbers historically, but it does feel very different than it ever has. And I've been here for just about every game. I missed, the first 17 or 18 games of this club's MLS years, but it seems like it's one of the worst droughts that we've been in. And I think what's weird is it's as a collective. We added a player like Adrian Hanu, at the start or a couple games into the season. It takes time for international players always to get incorporated. They always say usually 6 months. So as a player for him, guys come scored a lot of goals in France. I'm sure he's frustrated. Robin Lode has played sometimes up top, and our leading scorer being out with a little bit of a knock right now. So, Ray, another guy who, he creates a ton of stuff, but probably it doesn't have quite as many goals as we know he's capable of. He's definitely capable of being a double-digit scorer. So you just, and that it's an expectation that we have of each other as a group. So for us as a group to just kind of be down in the scoring myself, right? We're creating these chances, but putting them away is one thing. But I think if we do that scoring becomes infectious. And so we just really need to break that seal, hopefully on Saturday against Houston.
You mentioned Reynoso. It seemed like it took him about 5 minutes to get used to international, him coming over as an international, but
yeah,
definitely, I'm sure not like things came easy last year, and he's still having a really good season, but is there an adjustment period? You come in, you have so much success. He's still, I think ball possession metrics, he's still like number 2 in the league, things like that. Like just everything he's doing is still all the right things. But does that happen to a player sometimes where things are so good one year and then the expectations get raised even higher, and then it's hard to, do all those same things in year 2?
I think it is. And I think what I've seen with Ray, just from my point of view is, teams are focusing on him, and the way to stop him is they're fouling him. They're trying to be physical with him. We've seen in the last few games, and I think Adrian made some comments, and you hope referees look into that and see that and ref that. It happens in every sport. And we talk about all the time about NBA, and you see how different players get different calls, and that's part of the game. That's part of the sport. It's part of the type of player that he is. He does attract defenders. He wants to bring them close and take them on 1v1. So I just think he needs to, as a player, and he already has, is look at those moments and say, okay, how can I maybe change my game a little bit here and there, make an adjustment. Maybe I play a little bit quicker in this part of the field so that I don't, get tackled unnecessarily in these moments. But I think, in saying that, I think he has done a pretty good job at that. I mean, he's made adjustments. Him and Kevin had a great combination relationship last year. And I think now moving into 21, he's found that relationship with other players. And so that speaks to his quality and his ability to adapt to guys around him. And so, we just have to continue to feed him and get him in good spots.
Aside from get the ball to Ray, what do you think is the identity of this year's team?
Man, it's a good question, Michael. I'm not sure that I can give you a clear answer on that. And I think, that's something that it's not a concern of mine, but I definitely think it's something that we have not clearly established internally and even externally. I mean, I challenge someone else to say, what they think our identity is. I think our identity for a very long time has always been a team, first and foremost, that is really tough to break down defensively. And I still think that holds true with some of the results we've had, with the goals against that we've had. I think we're in the top 5 or 6 teams in the league at goals against. So I think that still speaks true. Where I think we don't clearly have an identity right now is, the possession aspect and what we're doing with it. I think our possession numbers are up than they were in previous years, but now what are we doing with that? And how are we, taking advantage of that? And is it an advantage for us? So for me, it's looking at those types of metrics and establishing if this is our best playing style and if this benefits us going forward, and how can we maximize it? And so for me, we've had more possession. So how can we maximize that? And that to me we need to be a little bit better in the final third. We need to be sharper. We used to be much more of a transition team, a team that our front four could really get out on teams when we had great defensive shape. And now, because we have a little bit more possession in the final third, we need to be able to figure out how to break teams down. And I've seen that in the last 2 games, having a man up for, I don't know what the total numbers, maybe 160 minutes. It's a lot, right? That's been a challenge for us. when they have 11 or 10 guys behind the ball, that's been extremely challenging. So we need to figure out how to break teams down like that, and because if that's going to be our identity going forward, we need to perfect that, and I don't think we quite have yet. I feel like we're close, and I think when we can do that, then that the possession aspect that I think our identity has become with the addition of Ray, we'll be able to maximize that and probably play our best stuff.
You born in Duluth, right?
Born in Duluth, yeah.
So you kind of grew up in various places. Does that make you still one of us? Are you one of us?
Well, so I asked this good question to my good friend Brent Coleman, who is also owned as a Minnesotan, and I said, well, if you're born in the United States, you're an American, right? You're from the United States. So
that's what I think.
Now people do move here, but a lot of times people who move here and they still have their citizenship somewhere else, they are say, hey, yeah, I live in the United States, but I'm from Canada,
Yes.
So my argument is I was born in Duluth. Brent is my guinea pig because Brent was actually born in Nebraska and moved here when he was 2.
I don't think I knew that. That's controversial.
Yeah.
Brent
so
is definitely
here.
Brent is definitely branded as one of us.
Exactly. So I like to say that I am cut from the cloth of the North Woods here because I was born in Duluth.
When did you move from Duluth?
About 4.
Okay.
Moved to North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember Duluth? Do you remember Duluth?
I do. But my wife and I actually went up and we actually drove up to Tofty, Minnesota. I don't remember it as well as I kind of thought I did. There's a couple landmarks and things that I experienced. My dad played men's ice hockey. I remember running up and down like he played over in Superior, and then running up and down these like Superior like hockey rinks. You know what I mean? I remember the bridge. That being just like kind of a figure or landmark in town. Obviously, I probably don't remember as well as I thought I did. I'll be honest about that.
I'm going to give an official ruling. You are one of us to me, and now you play for, the team in which the state you were born in. At least, does that carry significance to you, or does that because you moved away so early, does that connection not as strong?
No, I think it's plenty strong because I went from Duluth to North Carolina, and then North Carolina to Wisconsin, central Wisconsin, about 2.5 hours straight east of here. And, we spent a lot of time in the cities, and I spent a lot of time in Wisconsin and Minnesota off and on, and, played a lot of teams, played Shattuck St. Mary's back in the day, and actually almost went there in the boarding school situation and did soccer. So for me, I've always had like special memories, and the closest club at the time was Chicago Fire, but I didn't feel like that, you can ask anybody from Wisconsin and Minnesota. We all agree we don't want to be affiliated with anybody from Illinois,
No.
So for me, I think it's really special. I never honestly envisioned a day that a place like Minnesota or Minneapolis in particular, St. Paul, even Milwaukee or Madison would like have a professional soccer team. And now you look at that. I know Milwaukee has the Wave, which has been there for a while, but Forward Madison obviously as well. I think we're potentially could have a women's team here in this community. I think there's an opportunity to have a USL team still in this region as well. So the fact that soccer is growing in this area and is kind of now going to be embroidered, hopefully, in this next generation's lifestyle, right along there with the Vikings and the Timberwolves and the Twins, I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned kind of growing up, and now you are a dad. Yes, fairly recently, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right. I'm a father of one. My baby daughter Blake was born May 2nd.
So about 4 months old. So you're in the midst of it. Longtime podcast listeners know I have 3 kids. I have a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So I'm not going to dispense dad advice, but I'm just going to ask you, how's it going?
It's good. I have a lot of friends who are have had babies before me or are actually going through it right now. And so I've had a lot of people I can use as a sounding board and they ask me questions. I ask them questions. So that's been fun. What I've probably learned from that, and I try not to say it too much because I'm going to jinx it, is I have a pretty good sleeper is what it seems like.
Oh,
and
it's a big deal. Big deal.
It's a big deal. I'm not someone who actually needs much sleep, but my wife definitely is. So I'm very thankful because, her being happy and having her batteries recharged is extremely important to to make sure this family gets from point A to B.
Absolutely. That is a very astute point. And I think, sometimes I hear from athletes who, right before their first baby is born, or even just right after that can be kind of a stressful time. It could even impact performance. Did you have any of that come into the intermixing of, personal and professional as you were waiting for this to happen, or right after it happened?
Yeah, I think you're crazy to say that it doesn't affect you. Whether it's stress, whether it's lack of sleep, it's just an emotional time. Obviously extremely positive, but it definitely it takes away some of the energy and emotion that you have to put into training and games and whatnot. But saying that, I think I had a pretty good support system here. My wife's family has come up plenty. My family's been in town. So we've had a lot of people to be able to support us and help us, especially, around game time days, when those first couple of weeks are happening and you're just trying to get a fair amount of sleep before, a big game. I'd be lying to say I didn't enjoy a couple of the road trips that we had in early May. I felt bad for my wife, kind of being here alone, but like I said, she's a trooper. So yeah, I mean, anybody who says that it's not hard, and it wasn't difficult in the transition, but everyone's dealing with stuff. That's what I always say. Everyone's got something off the field that podcast, people listen to this are dealing with,
Sure.
that are doing regular jobs, and they go to their jobs and, they grind it 8 to 5 and don't complain about it. It doesn't affect their performance. So I don't like to think that it affects my performance by any bit.
Big time professional soccer player and new dad. Do you have time still for fantasy football, sir?
Yeah, well, we do. I was actually reluctant to even do a league this year. In fact, I took kind of last year off and COVID. I was like, this just feels like a weird fantasy football year. It's too much going on. So we actually didn't do one last year. It was the first time I probably haven't done one, honestly, since I've been in the league. And it's kind of, every team is different. We've got, depends how many international guys you got. Trying to get those guys into fantasy football can be a little bit challenging. But we've drawn a couple guys in. I think we're at maybe 10 or 11. We might be on the cusp of 11. So we might be looking for a 12th or having to cut somebody out of the league. But we will have a Minnesota United fantasy football league that gives us plenty of good banter in the locker room.
You got any draft strategies? Any who are you looking at? You Wisconsin, so are you Aaron Rodgers? Are you on that train?
You know what? I'm a Rodgers fan. I had Rodgers a couple of years ago, him and Devontae Adams, which was obviously a great combo. But I try to stay away from my heart when I'm in fantasy football. I'm full GM mode. I'm locked in. I'm cutthroat. You could be my actual friend, and I'd be like, hey, I had to move you. It is what it is.
Now you know how Adrian feels.
I get it. It's not a fun business. You don't have many friends when you're at the top making those kind of decisions.
Sounds good. Ethan Finlay, appreciate you joining Daily Delivery today. Get some rest. Good luck this weekend and with the rest of the season. All right.
Thanks, Michael. Take care.
You too.
Really enjoyed that conversation with Ethan Finlay. Good, just good perspective. I thought his answers about the style of the team and the identity of the Loons was really interesting in particular too. It'll help me kind of watch how this team plays down the stretch and whether they are kind of able to forge a more cohesive identity, especially on offense as the season goes along. Let's finish with the cooler. My goodness, Gavin Weir of South Dakota, Sioux Falls, pitching in the Little League World Series, had his fourth no-hitter, left-handed pitcher, fourth no-hitter going back to the regional stage. He's given up, going back to all of the regionals, all of the play in the Little League World Series and regional play. He's given up one hit and walked 6 guys in 132 batters. And this most recent no-hitter was Wednesday against Torrance, California. Struck out 14, no hits, no runs, 1-0 win. Amazing work by Gavin Weir, 12-year-old pitcher. He's been called the best pitcher in the country. I can see why. And he'll have another chance to do this. I think on Saturday might be the next game. They are all the way to the semifinals now. So congrats to him. Congrats to Sioux Falls. And we'll see how far they can take this. Thanks for joining me here today. Chris Hine on Friday's show to talk a little Timberwolves. Had a really long conversation and a big story coming out on new owner Mark Laurie. Want to talk to him about that, as well as a little bit of the Patrick Beverley trade that got finalized on Wednesday as well. Haven't talked to Chris about that, so that'll be coming up Friday. Tons of good stuff coming up next week as well. Thanks for joining me here today. I'm Michael Rand. We'll get you again on Friday.